Another positive comment about Public Works and how great they did over the winter. But they talked about the ordinance that we have that we've just passed, I don't know, last year, the year before, about the garbage cans being at the side of the house. I think everybody remembers before, the garbage can was required to be at the rear of your house. So we actually made this more lenient by allowing people to store them at the side of their house. I think now that enforcement is being done a little, I think, more on this. I think now we're seeing a few of those complaints. I know I've dealt with a few over that. This one went to Mr. Blankenship and asked. You know, I think our recommendation internally from the staff would be that we don't change anything. We've already made this ordinance lenient, more lenient
He's asking
than it
for
was
more
before.
leniency than
Yeah, they're asking for them to be stored in the front.
negative.
Yeah. So, and I think that's the, issue. I think every time that we come up with somebody.
I see ladies trying to kill themselves on a flat.
Shane, would that be a negatory?
It'll be negative.
Yeah, we've discussed it and we've said no.
Blankenship, no.
Great discussion.
Okay, last but not least,
Is he still here?
Greg,
Yep.
we'll talk budget.
Did you bring me some water?
Yeah, here.
It's getting late.
Oh, man, we should have made you first.
all your good news.
It is good news. It is good news.
Forgot about that.
You should have received a packet in your mail slots this evening.
Trees.
And yeah, there are trees dead.
He heard you.
I'm not going to go through every page like I usually don't.
Amen, brother.
Included in the packet is the mayor's budget message, and then some highlights from the general fund in particular. The mayor's budget message just basically gives you a narrative of the most significant changes and items in the budget. On the first page, if you look at the fund statement, it's a snapshot of all of our city funds. And our total revenues in the general fund this year, we expect to be $16.5 million. All funds, $18.4 million. Total appropriations in the general fund of about 15.8, and all funds of 18.8. The general fund statement is on page 2, and if as we're going through this, we're going to be, as always, asking council to approve an amended budget for fiscal year 14 as well as a proposed budget for 15. So I'll be making comments that address both, but generally, in the fiscal year 14 amended budget, we began the year with just short of $7.3 million in the fund balance. We expect to end the year with just over $8 million before we take out all the reserves. It's great news. Fiscal year 15, we'll expect to begin the year with that same $8 million and end the year with about the same $8 million. So and that'll put us about $3.1 million above all of our reserves. So we're in really good fiscal health at this particular point. The general fund revenues, which are on page 3 of the packet, I'm not going to touch on all of them, but the one I do want to touch on in particular is the real estate taxes. We did include in our budget projections the compensating +4 revenues. It's important to realize and note that approving the budget does not commit you to that compensating +4 rate. The compensating +4, or the rate is set in August or September, not at the point that you adopt the budget. So the mere fact that you approve the budget does not indicate that you are in favor or against the the compensating, using the compensating plus 4. You'll get your opportunity to do that later in the summer. The insurance premiums taxes were actually down a little bit on the last 12 months that we've seen collections, but we did increase them 3% for next year because we believe that those increases are going to occur. Payroll license fees and occupational license fees are continuing to grow thanks to the economic development efforts. Our biggest new taxpayer is St. Elizabeth's and their office complex with the 350 new jobs, and we're already starting to see some significant increases as a result of that. The franchise fees on gas and electric bills, that was put in last year, if you recall, in order for us to fund the dispatch operations. We're going to have that for a full year this year. Last year we budgeted it only for a half a year, but as it turned out, with Frank working with Duke, we were able to get it in place a little bit earlier than federal block grants are down significantly, and I'm very pleased to announce that because that means that those 3 road projects are finally done. The same 3 road projects that were in place the day I walked through the door. And Dave kept assuring me year after year that they were going to be done. And every year, be like, they done yet? Nope, state's holding them up. They're done.
What are you gonna do with that bridge we sold you?
We'll worry about that next year. Other federal grants are down fairly significantly, and that's because we no longer have the SAFER grant that was paid out in 12 and 13. The 911 fees wireless, that's the money that we're going to be getting from the state for 911 fees, and that money will be fully reserved going forward to pay for the any capital needs that we have in the dispatch system. And finally, on the revenue page, the police department charges for services, that includes, that's significantly up this year. That includes the Crescent Springs police contract as well as the dispatch contracts with Ellesmere and Crescent Springs. So the general fund revenues are up fairly substantially. Before I start going through the expenses in the general fund, I'll point out that there are a lot of changes this year compared to previous years. So when you try to compare year to year within each department, you're likely to get confused. If you do, please call me or come in and see me or call Mark or somebody because there are a lot of changes and movement in personnel. Primarily just due to a lot of the reorganizations that we've been going through in the last year. But on page 4 and 5 of the General Government Department, in all of the payroll numbers, there is a 1.5% cost of living adjustment. Recall the whole salary structure or restructure deal. There was a base amount that would be based on the cost of living increases, the CPIW. That's what the 1.5% is. And we'll get into the other parts of that in just a minute. We also have in general government moved Ralph and Rodney from general government to public works. We've moved Mark Stewart from the fire department back to general government. We have a new position in the general government department, the community liaison position. There are a number of title changes throughout the personnel sheets. That was all part of the reorg and salary restructuring. We moved all of the building maintenance costs that formerly were in the general government department to public works. Those are some fairly significant changes in some of the operational line items, as well as Rodney and Ralph's salaries. We moved all HR-related expenses to general government. In the past, we had, particularly when it came to hiring folks, the professional services involved with hiring people, the doctors and the pre-employment exams and all that kind of stuff, that was all charged to each of the individual departments. We've moved all of that now to the HR, under HR in the general government department, so it'll all be in one place. Under recruitment and retention, there's a very significant change. There's $143,000 included in that line item this year, and this is in the general government department. The reason for that is to help us with that whole salary adjustment thing. If you recall, one of the key factors in that was to try to move people more to the midpoint of the benchmark cities that had been selected. We've got a long way to go on that. So that money was set aside to begin to move some of the folks who are furthest away from the midpoint closer to the midpoint, and also to provide the reward or award program that we talked about for exemplary or extraordinary employees that would get a one-time a year or one-time payment. On page 6 and 7, we've changed the name of the information systems or IT department to Communications Technology and Innovations Department. We also moved a part-time police officer from the police department over to that department. We moved all telecom-related expenses from the other departments into that department. We had, for the most part, we had most, I'd say probably 85, 90% of those expenses already in IT. We moved all telecom-related expenses over there now, including dispatch. And then it also incorporates all of the changes that Steve Castor detailed in his presentation a couple weeks ago, last month. Page 8 and 9 in the police department, the biggest changes there are we included an assistant chief, and we eliminated the captain's positions. We also included all the dispatch expenses for a full year. If you recall, last year we had it split because we were in the process of divesting ourselves of the dispatch operation, and the partners were leaving, and we had some still in, some out. Everything this year in fiscal year 15 is going to be in the police department. In the fire EMS department, we eliminated the assistant fire chief position, but we created another administrative captain position. We also added 8 new firefighter paramedics. In order to pay for a good bit of those new 8 employees, there's a significant reduction in the number of part-time hours that are budgeted. We believe that that's going to create a lot more flexibility for the chief in his scheduling, and hopefully create a much better department. We also, again, moved Mark Stewart from the fire department over to general government. Page 12 and 13, we have the Public Works Department. Included in there are basically the same employees that we currently have, with the addition of a seasonal employee on a part-time basis. We have also, as I just mentioned, included all the building maintenance costs. Street maintenance cost is a little bit higher than normal due to the harsh winter. We have to probably buy more salt next year because our bin isn't quite as full now as it was at this time last year, and the price per ton has gone up. Grant expenditures in that particular department are down, again, because of those 3 road projects finally being completed. Page 16 and 17 is a detailed list of all the capital expenditures. And this is in the Capital Assets Fund. Included in there are some software purchases, vehicle and equipment replacements, all pursuant to the equipment or the replacement committee recommendations. $250,000 for initial cost of Fire Station 1. As we started looking at this, and that's slightly higher than we had in there when we had our meeting last month. When we started looking at this, we were not sure if we're going to.
All right. Some grandkid got a hold of this and put something on there that I didn't know was there, so. That's a true statement. I don't know what that button's for, so there. I pushed it and I saw Camden on there. I went, where in the hell did that come from?
We've got $250,000 in the budget for the initial cost of the fire station, and that may include some acquisition, it may include some design. Right now, we're not really sure, but we do know that there's going to be some significant costs involved in that whole thing as we move forward. We've included $350,000 for the next phase of the Donaldson Commonwealth Beautification Project. We've got $94,000 in there to repair drainage in the back parking lot here, as well as the retaining wall. We've got $225,000 in there for a new roof for the building, because we shouldn't need it, but we do.
We don't need a new.
Well,
Just more.
We just need more buckets.
More buckets.
I was going to say, I'll move that bucket out of the way and you can let me know. And we have,
Bring all of our computer equipment in here and put it under a tent.
yeah, that would work. And we've got $1.5 million in there for street resurfacing and concrete street replacements. Also included in the budget on page 21 is a list of all the assumptions we use for the 3-year projections. We did, as we talked about at your budget retreat, increase or expand the horizon on the capital assets to a 10-year projection. And all the assumptions that we used are included on that page on page 21. On page 22, this is the general fund fund statement. And the good news is that even at the end of that 3rd year, if everything goes according to the budget, we'll still have about $1.5 million over and above our 30% reserves that have been set aside in the general fund. And on page 23 is a fund statement for the capital asset fund, and that's even better news, because at the end of the 10-year projection, we're going to have about $4.8 million in addition in that fund. That number is probably not as accurate as I would like it, not only because of the horizon. Going 10 years is very difficult to project. But we also just don't have a real good handle yet on some of the equipment stuff. The vehicles, we've got a pretty good handle on that, and we can kind of project those fairly easily. The equipment is something that the committee has just taken on this year, and we'll be refining that as we move forward in the next few years. And then page 24 is a detailed list of the 10-year capital purchase estimates. And again, as I said, the vehicles are fairly, in streets are fairly accurate. The equipment is still a little bit rough. Page 25, and just a side note, if we wind up having to do a bond issue for the firehouse or the community center, as we've talked about, having those 10-year projections is going to really help our bond issue, or our bond rating when we do the issue. Moody's really likes to see those multi-year projections, particularly on capital assets. Page 25 and 26 are the fund statements, the three-year fund statements for the employee health and police forfeitures funds. No significant changes there. After the close of the dispatch fund in this current fiscal year, we're going to be down to only 4 funds, folks, and that's good from an accounting perspective. And it'll make it easier for you all to look at each year. And only 2 of those are going to be really significant, that being the general fund and the capital assets fund. The forfeiture fund and the employee health fund are both relatively small and don't have a whole lot of activity. That's the end of my presentation. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions or take any comments you have. The fact that the news is so good this year still scares me a little bit, I must admit, because it just seems almost too good, but I haven't found anything yet. I'm continuing to look, but I think it's attributable.
You can't accept the goodness.
I can't, I mean, I've never been in a place like this. But I think it's all thanks to the fiscal conservative nature of the city council and more so than anything, probably putting that capital asset fund in place 3 years ago. That's just made a unbelievable difference.
And that was your doing, and that was brilliant.
On the 4% we talked about,
Yes,
get in the budget.
yes.
We put it in the budget for the last 3 or 4 years, I know we have. How many times have we actually taken it?
We haven't taken it the last 3 years.
I just wanted everybody to know that.
Yeah.
because
Okay, but if you don't take it, you never get it
Right.
back.
If we don't take it and put it in the budget, we don't get it back. But we haven't taken it in the last 3 years, so.
And you're right.
We need to take it. We need to pad this budget, boys. We got a lot of shit going on.
I disagree,
Well,
Patty.
I disagree too.
I disagree,
but
Patty.
I say we
No.
cross that bridge in September when we need to cross
That's what I'm
it.
saying. But everybody's coming across
You think it's already been.
that they feel that once we put it in here, we're gonna take it. But we've not done it for 3 years. We've
No,
always
that's
put it in
true.
here.
You gotta
But
put it in.
it's stupid not to take it.
option.
We've,
That Engelman guy over there, he knows that it's up for discussion, so he's
Yeah.
pretty sure you got a good feel of where the budget's at if we take it.
yeah, and we'll know much better when we get to the point where we have to set the tax rate, because by then we'll have the fiscal year completed, and we'll also have some idea on some development issues and
Yeah.
whether things are moving in the right
You know,
direction.
in the budget planning process, I call that a placeholder. We put that number in there to hold the spot until we figure out what we really have.
It gives you the option.
Yeah.
And the last couple of years, the last 3 years, actually, once we got to the point where we were setting the tax rate, we were able to take the compensating rate, not the compensating plus 4, and still make the budget number. So that's partly because of the conservative nature of the budget process.
You know, early in my term, my first term as mayor, the first 3 or 4 years, all we did in March was cut. Red line, red pencil, cut. Not in this budget. This budget, we're
No, and I don't
adding,
want us to see us
we're,
cutting again.
we're adding and adding and adding and still within our expected revenues. We're able to get, Mark has done, yay. What do you call, Kathy, how do you do it? Woo-woo. Yeah.
That's mine, yes.
That's it. Mark is, I mean, we've done some reorganization and some fairness things on the payroll that's gonna really make us competitive as far as employers go, but it's not busting the bank. And, between Mark and Greg and Missy and putting this, and everybody, have the whole crew putting this thing together, it's a pretty good document. I feel pretty comfortable with it.
Kudos, job well done.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Other questions?
Any questions of Greg?
Just another great job, Greg.
Well, thank you.
We appreciate it.
Is there anything else you all want to bring up for the good of the order this evening? If not, let's go home.
Okay.
Let's go home.
What did we decide with threes?
Hey, guys, you all hung in there pretty good tonight.
Yeah, you guys were great.
You're lucky today.